Dramas within the 9 to 5. What I find is that basically, when you're working in a job that you don't necessarily enjoy or find fulfillment, you end up squabbling over power between your colleagues because you want to feel better about yourself, and in your desperate attempt to do that, you end up trying to oppress, consciously or unconsciously, your colleagues by just trying to be the boss, trying to manage them, trying to manage them by directing them, by telling them what to do. But unnecessarily, in most cases, you're not even the manager. You're just trying to feel better about yourself and prove to your colleague that you are, that you are the boss and that you are going to manage them, and it's not going to be the other way around. Whereas, how do they know that you want to be the boss? What you're not necessarily trying to manage them, but they're desperate and very, quick to try and manage you and tell you what to do and tell you how to do your job, because they don't trust you. They don't trust themselves. So then they think that they want to, boss other people around in order to feel better about themselves, because they're not grounded within themselves, and they're doing something that they don't feel is fulfilling them. And so then they're projecting that emotional baggage onto their colleagues. And that's essentially why I have to escape the 9 to 5, because in most cases it's full of people who are projecting their emotional pain of the circumstances that they're in, the 9 to 5, working a job that they hate, or a job that they don't necessarily feel rewarding. They don't feel that they're getting any fulfillment from that, and so they project all of that baggage onto the nearest person who happens to be their colleague. And I've experienced this so many times, and especially if you work in hospitality, it can be very toxic, because most people who work in hospitality don't want to be there, and so they project all of that pain and suffering onto their fellow human being, and as a result it kind of creates this toxic environment, and it creates a situation where people are just squabbling for power and unnecessarily trying to oppress those people around them to make themselves feel better. I've experienced it so many times, and then you find yourself in survival mode and you have to defend yourself, and then you're getting into these emotional battles and spiritual battles, and then that becomes friction between you and your colleagues, and then you say to yourself, I need to leave this job, and then you end up finding another job, and you could be going around in circles and you can end up in the same situation. So I decided to basically get myself out of that situation, but I'm still working a 9 to 5, and in this case I don't get into those situations in that because the majority of people that are working in the place that I work in now don't feel this sort of like resentment for the job they're doing. So you might occasionally get into some emotional friction, but it's not at a toxic level to the point where you're always getting into these little squabbles. It's more of a balanced situation where it's just an occasional friction, but it's not an ongoing, consistent thing where you're always getting into these squabbles and unnecessary debates and power struggles between people that hate their situation. So basically I'm in a sort of like purgatory situation where it's not necessarily amazing, but it's not hell. So the next step is going to create a situation where I'm in complete alignment with who I am and the work that I'm doing, whether that's performing or not performing, is always going to be rewarding. And that's the situation that I'm currently aiming for. And I will get there because I'm nearly there and I can feel it. Because the job that I'm doing now is around, I'd say 75% rewarding, and then there's just that 25% that you feel is just frustrating and occasionally emotionally draining, which is tolerable, but at the same time you're still having to recover on your days off, still having to recharge your batteries. Whereas, yeah, you're going to be tired through whatever work you do, but there are levels to it, and sometimes the emotional drainage is too much, and then you know that it's basically because of the type of work you're doing, and yeah, you need to just reevaluate the situation. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm just basically on that mission. And I am very excited, that I've actually started this journey of just expressing myself more in my expressing my intentions more and documenting the process, so then I can keep track of where I'm going and where I was, and then it kind of gives me some sort of idea of how to continue and how to make the next move based on previous experience that has been documented. So yeah, I'm really excited about that journey. But those are the kind of so going back to the squabbling between colleagues, when you notice that you're in a situation where you're finding that you're always in some sort of combative situation between you and one or two colleagues in your workplace, it might be because you're not feeling settled in that place, and you're not feeling like you're doing something that's rewarding and that's aligned with who you are as a person. And so then that's projected out into the world, and you are then in conflict with other people who are also not doing what they are aligned to do. And so then you're just in this survival mode of only working for the money, and it creates a friction between you and the colleagues around you, and that's what happens basically. So it's just getting out of that situation basically, which is the hard part. It's not going to be easy, and it's not it's not going to be easy basically, but it has to be done if one is to find some fulfillment and work in a situation that is aligned with who you are. So those are the signs to look out for. If you're trying to slowly maneuver yourself out of the 9 to 5, one of the things that you can guarantee that is a sign is the emotional drainage, feeling drained at work, but also squabbling for power between you and your colleagues, getting into unnecessary debates, and that's just a manifestation of the unfulfillment. You know, the conflict, the constant repetitive conflict in your situation, people projecting their own pain onto you, their own problems onto you, because they're in a situation that they don't necessarily want to be in. Yeah, that is it basically. That is really it on that one. You know, I've always wanted to talk about that actually, that because I've always noticed that people like to squabble, you know. There's this kind of emotional squabble for power, and what happens is that, you know, your supervisor or your manager gives someone a promotion or gives them some sort of step up, which is a half promotion. It's not even a real position. They just say, okay, you're in charge of these people. And then what that does is that inflates their ego, and then they start to go around oppressing their colleagues to make themselves feel better, because they're now in a position of power or perceived power, and then they start using that to abuse those people around them. You know, of course, it's not everyone, but it's some people do that. When they do get themselves in a position of a little power, they start to abuse it by abusing their colleagues, you know, and that can manifest in many ways. It can be them basically trying to not give you a break, or delaying the time that they give you a break and watching you kind of suffer as a result of that. It could be them telling you to always throw the rubbish out, you know, just sort of imbalanced kind of treatment where they're targeting you and letting other people off the hook because they are their favorites, but you, for some reason, tend to be the one that they always tell to do the dirty jobs or the crappy little jobs, you know, whereas it should be a balanced situation. And I'm normally referring to jobs in hospitality, you know, where I don't necessarily have a problem with, you know, taking the rubbish out and cleaning down the surfaces, but you do tend to wonder sometimes whether, you know, these petty managers are picking on you when new people or existing staff never get told to do that, and you know, you get told to do it, or you're expected to do it all the time, and others around you are expected to do it all the time. So, and also what I notice is that sometimes working hard doesn't even pay. You know, I remember working so hard in this hospitality job, you know. I'm talking, you know, cleaning down the surfaces, taking the bins out, you know, making coffee, and but always constantly doing something. And it didn't actually get me anywhere, to be honest with you, because there are other people that were doing less and they were just getting away with it because they were liked by the manager, you know, or you get supervisors who were once in your position as a team member and they worked hard, and then when they became a supervisor, they suddenly started to change their nature and abuse team members, abuse their colleagues, and then start bullying people around them and getting them to do things that they want them to do, and then focusing on the people that they don't like and just getting them to do all the kind of jobs that they think that you should do, basically. And they you know, yeah, basically. I don't know, this is a little rant actually, but it's an honest rant, and it's a kind of reflection on what happens in the 9-to-5 situation, in particularly if you're working in jobs that you don't find fulfillment in. You find yourself in these situations where you're fighting to survive and you're being targeted by petty managers. By petty managers, I mean like the supervisors, the lower kind of managers. And yeah, this kind of conflict basically that goes on between you and them, and you and your other colleagues, because you're not in a situation where you feel fulfilled. So that manifests as conflict. Because yeah, when you're doing something where you feel fulfilled, you feel, that natural happiness just arises, and you just feel a sense of peace, internally. And when you are in that state, other people around you are in that state as well. Not all the time. And of course, you're not always in that state, even if you are doing what you love. But the majority of the time, you're in that state. And it kind of radiates out. And you just feel this heightened, happiness and inner peace. Because it's a healthy environment. You're in complete focus. You're in complete alignment with who you are internally. And once that happens, there cannot be anything outside of you that sort of creates friction, because you're in alignment. You're expressing your true essence. But when you're in a system like this, where the main goal is to earn money, to survive, it then becomes an ongoing battle to basically do what you love, because there's so much pressure just to kind of pay the bills that you end up doing unnecessary jobs to get by. And then you get emotionally sick and mentally sick and have to recharge your batteries every so often by going out and spending time in nature, or doing counseling or doing some other kind of personal reflection to kind of reset the internal conflict and bring you back to a state of balance. So yeah, it's getting out of that cycle of needing to keep recharging, resetting and rebalancing. And when you're in complete alignment and doing what you love continuously, I think that you won't need to do that on such a frequent basis. You won't have to keep doing that, keep resetting yourself and keep recharging, because you're doing work that's re-energizing you and rejuvenating your soul. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to being in that continual alignment. Yeah, and I will say, of course, doing what you love doesn't mean that you're exempt from the forces of nature and that you're not going to have bad days. Of course you are. It's just that you're going to have that inner balance, and then you're going to be able to manage that conflict when it arises in more of a balanced state of being, rather than a lowly, emotionally drained state. Wow, look at this.